to another episode of the mystical journey of CNC of me and my sister. So I'm Chloe Trujillo. This is Coralie Bollier, and today we have a wonderful guest, Marcella, and I'm gonna let you introduce yourself a little bit.
Oh, hi. My name is Marcella Kroll. I'm an artist and psychic medium, and I'm a tarot and oracle deck creator. Yeah, so that's what I do.
Right.
Yeah.
So we usually start with this question: is how did you get started? How did you find your path? Like,
Mm,
how was it like an easy road? Did you always know inside yourself what you wanted to
mhm,
do, or is it something that came along the way, where you had like events in your life that
mhm.
brought you to this path this journey that you're on today?
Well, it's been a on and off the road journey in the sense that I was really sensitive and aware of a lot of things as like a child, but I didn't have any mentors that could tell me what was going on and at the time, and I only knew like one side of my family, and that side was not open to talking about mystical things. It was very hush hush. So I kind of shut down, after at around like 8, 9 years old. I kind of just shut down seeing things and went
So
more
you
into
were
art.
seeing things like very sensitive and
Yeah,
away.
I would see like my deceased grandfather and say things, and my mom would get really freaked out and be like, "You're not seeing that." So it would. I kind of like learned really quick, okay, to talk about certain things, but like, when you're a little kid, like have a filter really.
Yeah.
So I would see things and play, and like, a lot of times it was kind of dismissed as make believe, until around 8 or 9, where I just started to like kind of shut it out. And then, um, you know, uh, I had a rough journey with like drugs and alcohol through my teens, and it led to an overdose, which led to a psychic kind of awakening, because everything that was shut down had turned back on and I couldn't shut it off. Still had no kind of direction really, but I will say that's when I started to learn how to work with tarot cards and things like that, because um, I couldn't do anything in rehab. Rehab
That's
was not really common.
most of people's stories, including ourselves, is like
Uh-huh.
this opening. It's like almost you gotta have like this event that like kicks you in the butt like really hard, and
Yeah.
then it opens up like a whole. Either it's like you're done, or you
Yeah.
survive per se, and then you open up to this whole new realm.
Totally. I mean, in that period when I overdosed, it was a near death experience, and I felt myself leave my body, but then I felt myself get shoved back into my body, which is a really bizarre feeling, to feel yourself come back in. I felt myself being pushed in the shoulders.
Mm.
Um and I knew in the moment, like, oh, I'm here for a reason. I just didn't know why. And then it's still no real, like, even like learning tarot and things like that, I taught myself, because no one around me was really into that. Everyone was very like rock and roll and like, oh, that's weird hippie shit, like they would say stuff like that. And so I kind of like had like this separate part of my identity that I would kind of partake in, until actually I moved to California. And so I mean, that was like and I moved to LA in 2006, and when I had that first near death, it was, or I would say second near death, it was in 1995. So it was a big window. um and again, it wasn't something that I thought about doing for work, or even like being in, because it just wasn't talked about until a third near death experience in Los Angeles. And I it just life took everything away from me, and all I had was my spiritual connection. And I would do readings. I mean, I was doing readings periodically, but very reluctantly for people. Like, I was like, no, I don't want to do it.
Mhm.
um but then it just kept happening. Like, people kept coming to me, or and it finally got to the point in there was a point like where around 2000, it was 2009, I took the leap and started doing readings like as my only job. Um, but I still was an artist and I still wanted to bridge that part of me in, because it's like on the East Coast, I was very much involved with my art, but like out on the West Coast, it was more the spiritual stuff. And then kind of bringing it all together around 2000, it was 2015, I came out with my first deck. And it was like the first experience I had of bringing like my spiritual work and my art like together. And that changed everything, really.
I have one question. So when you
Sure.
were a kid, were you able to make sense of what was happening, or it's only later that you understood what you
I no, I didn't really know what I was like touching in on, because the adults were so not interested or fearful, you know. My
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting. It's like as I got older, you know, I find out that like it runs on both sides of my family. Because you know, and a lot of the adults were so, my mother's family are very Italian Catholic, and like my like couple of the older, my great aunts were like stregas, like full on, and like, you know, but they, when they came to America, they became like very want to be American Catholic, you know, kind of like really, we don't talk about this kind of thing. And so it was very hush hush. And you know, there wasn't really anyone to encourage me to follow like a spiritual path in that way. And then, you know, only 2 years ago, I found my biological father, and I found out, and I actually spoke with my biological grandmother, his mother, and she was a tarot reader.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. And you know, I mean, it would have been nice to know that growing up.
Yeah.
Probably would have been really helpful, but I think it's
But
really confirming.
sometimes you need that those hard moments or those slaps in the face or whatever you can call it, to
It's a
kind of
journey.
wake you up even more. Like, you know, because if you had known that, maybe you would have been like, oh no, I'm not going to do the same thing or something like that. You know, it has to
Right.
be like your way.
Yeah, definitely. I think it, you know, it's interesting. Like as like a little kid, I was told like I would try to heal people. I mean, you know, I would do things and like there was no positive reinforcement for it. It was
Yeah.
like, you know, it was very much like you're doing something bad.
Yeah.
So
So now, so you do tarot. What other things did you kind of develop as far as the spiritual side? Because I, you know, as an artist myself and as a spiritual person too, I
yes.
totally understand that link between also creating art and you know, like my process, I have visions and then this is what I paint. But um, you know, you probably have like a similar kind of thing. What would you call like your main thing is like your, I don't know
Hmm.
what to call thing like that, you know, that purpose or that like what's your
Mhm. Well, I mean, there's a few things that I think that come into play with the work that I do. I do a lot of teaching as well, like spiritual kind of like empowerment classes and things. But a lot of the work, it's like it's multifaceted, you know, like you know, I'll do readings and I'll use tarot, but I'm also very clairvoyant, and a lot of it has to do with healing like the baseline experience. So sometimes, you know, someone will come to me about, you know, a love question or something, and really what we're doing is, it's not about the relationship per se, but it's about getting to the place where you're healed enough to have the relationship, or kind of going in and healing the broken links. And you know, I channel a lot, and sometimes I channel, it will be like a meditation, or like it's a past life healing, because I do a lot of like healing within past life work. um, you know, guiding them through the process. Also healing ancestral lineages, especially for people who feel like they're in the liminal space, like myself, people who feel like they don't belong to one path, you know, because they come from many bloodlines. And you know, it's really about empowering the person to find their whole self. And, you know, and then in terms of like my own creativity, it varies. You know, I love creating like decks, like to help other people, give them a tool so they can help themselves.
I
But
love your
then,
by the way.
thank you.
It's really, I mean, you know, I use all kinds of decks, but
Mhm.
I really love yours.
Oh, thank you.
Also,
Yeah, it's fun to do that. Like give other people like, here's the tool, like you know, like learning how to find that within them to take their power back, you know.
Where can people find your deck just so that they can look at it?
Sure. I do have them usually on my Etsy shop or sometimes in stores, but right now I'm actually sold out of everything and waiting while everything's being reprinted. And because of COVID delays, like things have happened really like slowed down, you know. So hopefully there's a restock of my sacred symbols coming next month, February, and my Nature Nurture Oracle and my Dreamers Tarot will be back in April. Yeah. So you know, it's just all different processes, I think, you know. One thing with COVID that I have not been able to do, which is a big part of my process, is performance ritual, which is like doing public ritual. So I do look forward to the day being able to kind of bring that back into the world.
yeah. And then when you talk about ritual, what kind, is there specific uh, rituals that you do with inviting people to participate?
Yeah, I mean, well, when I've done them, like some of them I've done outdoors, like at the LA River. Other times they've been at like a Elsid, like this burlesque, they'll do a burlesque night, and I'll do the intermission. Before the intermission, I do the ritual or the second act. And each one, it always has a different theme. So like one I did like calling in the energy of Lilith, you know, bring on your inner kind of badass, you know. Another one I did as like a ritual dedicated to Mithra, which is like, you know, bringing light back into your vision. You know, a lot of the rituals are meant as like they're a spectacle, because I want people to feel like they can participate, but they can also just watch. So they all have different themes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I imagine that now you're doing your consultations on the phone or online.
Mhm.
Is it different for you to do it like that, or rather than seeing the person, you know, in person, or it
You
doesn't?
know, it doesn't affect it. I think the only time it's different is if the person is not focused, you know. And I try to tell people that like I'm doing a reading virtually or over the phone works exactly the same, because we're just tapping into your energy. But if you're, say, you know, like scrolling through something, or you're not paying attention, like that's what's going to make it difficult, you know. So sometimes it can be a little bit distracting if the person is not focused. But if you make, I tell people, you know, if you get to a quiet space and you set the time up for yourself, um you know, it'll be just the same. So
Yeah.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So when you see someone, do you have sometimes visions that come in, or do you mostly rely on the cards and you don't want to go into the things that you may be feeling, and you want to rely on something that's more concrete? Or it
No,
depends on clients, I suppose, but
I think now, you know, I barely, I use cards, but I like kind of, it's like it's multi-communicating. It's like sometimes I'm just laying out cards, I'm not even looking at them, and I'm just channeling the information, because it is like getting like 3 feeds of information at once. So I don't like relying on them, but I do definitely look at them as part of the framework. It's like with a story, almost like you have, you know, you'll have like your outline, you know, be like, okay, here's the intro, but like what else is in here? And some people, it depends on the person. Like some people who are more visual, like I might get, you know, very honed in on the cards, you know. And then some people who are more like energy sensitive or things like that, I start to feel it's easier to feel into whatever they're comfort level is. I think a lot of times with using the cards, it's more for the other person than it is for me,
Yeah,
you know. Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, the cards are more like a support, I think.
totally.
Yeah.
So how did you get your training? Did you mainly read books on, to develop your abilities, or did you have specific training with people that were your mentors?
Well, I think what started with tarot was more just not books. It was just me with the cards and like looking at each one, and just for years I would just kind of play with them for myself, and I, actually some book things that kind of started to help me early on was more like one of my mom's friends gave me a psychic self-defense book, which I had never, she was more open, and she was like, I think you need this book. I think I was like 14 when I first got it, and I didn't really acknowledge it, until a little bit later. But and then I had like just a couple of random, I would get readings, and they would encourage me to like look at different books. And that helped. The only kind of training I would say that I had, not with my readings, but I did a couple of like classes and things with like Don Jose Ruiz, and he led a weekend of Toltec angel training, and where his father Don Miguel showed up, and they both like kind of held the space for us to really work out through meditation our own abilities and our own blocks. There was also, I worked at Mystic Journey Bookstore in Venice. I worked there for 10 years, and I met a lot of interesting healers and other people that I would partake in their classes in. And another one that I actually had the honor of learning from was Dr. Brian Weiss, who teaches a lot on past life regression. But I never had a formal like apprenticeship or mentoring with a particular person.
Mhm. So I have a question on past life regressions.
Sure.
Because one time I went to someone and did that work probably about 8 years ago. And it was interesting because I was almost feeling as though I was making things up and like I had to come up with things. And
Mhm.
he was telling me, no, actually, you're not. They're here. So I'm interested in knowing how you conduct it and what your views are on it.
Well, personally, with past life regression, I prefer to kind of help guide people through that process through like a guided meditation, right? And through that guided meditation, I can take them on a journey and ask them questions, and they can kind of call out what they're hearing. And I often tell people, like, just go with the first thing that comes up, right? Because sometimes we do have this like fear of it being like, oh, maybe I'm making this up. Maybe this was based on a movie I saw. But I think it's important to know that you're having an experience and your brain has stored this information in a particular way. So why not like release the doubt and just go with it? Because there's some narrative here that is being stored in your mind that tells a particular story. I personally believe in reincarnation. I also believe not just in past lives, but I also believe in future timelines and parallel timelines. So sometimes there might be things that come up that make no sense because it is future related and you're getting a glimpse of that, but I do believe in the power of past life regression because in my own personal experience, I had profound healing from it. And I don't know, I think there's just this aspect, you can doubt it and kind of, or you can choose to have trust and faith that you're seeing this thing for a purpose, for a reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with you. It's like I mean, even, I used to do some readings for, for people where I wouldn't even want to see their faces. I would do it on Skype like before Zoom even existed years ago. And I just, it's just a matter of trusting what you're getting. And sometimes I would type in the message I would get to that person, and that person at the same time was typing the question I was already answering. It's kind of like, but the moment you doubt what you're seeing or what you're getting, that's like,
Yeah.
it's over.
I
It's
know. It's
really
like,
a lot of like, I mean, I'm sure with you too, for your work, you had to do a lot of self work, like work on yourself,
yeah.
or you know, it's like always like, it's a constant.
It's a constant thing. Yeah, you're never fully done. And I
Yeah.
think that's like, that can be tiring, or making sure that you're taking enough space to do your own work.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you get burnt out and not
Yeah.
actually be able to help another.
And then,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the other thing too, trusting what you're getting. Even if you think it doesn't make sense, it probably makes sense for the person
yeah.
that you're reading. Like one time, particularly the way I never realized it. Like he put it so eloquently, this other reader, he said, the way you read, he's like, you might have someone come to you with a question. He's like, but you don't give them the answer necessarily they want, but you give them the truth.
Yeah.
And I think, like, for example, I had a woman that came to me once at Mystic Journey, and I think she thought, oh, I'm just going to get a quick love reading about this person I'm thinking about, right? And the whole time, every time she was trying to talk to me, I kept hearing and seeing in my head like a loaf of bread like this. And I was like, oh my God, like, why am I was like, maybe I'm hungry. Like, I don't know. Like, I can't, I was like, I said, I'm so sorry, but like, I know you're asking about this, but like, I keep seeing two hands holding out like a fresh loaf of bread. And it's really, I just like, and I have to get it out. And she started crying. And I was like, uh-oh, like, what did I do? And then she said, oh, she's like, my aunt passed away 2 days ago, and we used to make fresh bread together all the time. And I just haven't really thought about it. And I was like, okay. So like she came in for a love reading, but really it's like she was
Something else
her,
needed to
yeah,
be.
her subconscious and her aunt were trying to like, hey, like, don't think about this guy, think about me,
Yeah.
like, here's this bread, So sometimes it might feel like, oh, am I like loony? What is happening here? But really it means something to the other person.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of trust. And I often say too, like, sometimes I'll just say something that might not make sense to you. It might not make sense to, what you're asking for, but just make a note of it, jot it down. It might make sense later. And oftentimes it will come up later in conversation, or maybe like the next day I get an email and they're like, oh, by the way,
Yeah.
this happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny how it works.
Yeah. Especially because you're like, you have to really differentiate like what is yours and what is another person.
Yeah.
And that can be challenging too, especially if you're sensitive or empathic, you have a tendency to take on things.
Yeah.
So,
Sure.
And I think
yeah.
the thing is that I've heard a lot of people, in the more spiritual journey say that I'm not, if you're a non-believer, it's fine. I'm not trying to make you believe. You
Right.
take the message and then you do whatever you want with it, but
Right.
you're not trying to make a non-believer believe.
Right. And I often tell those people who are like, kind of prove it. And I'm like, I don't have to prove anything. You don't have to do the reading either.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, I don't, it's the same thing when people try to force like people they love to do a reading and they're not interested. I'm like, that's like the worst way to get, you're not going to get anything, and it doesn't help them. They have to kind of want to have a sliver of wanting to do it,
Yeah, for sure. I think, yeah, because I remember the first time it was Gail that got me a reading. She got a reading for everybody, and she never told me. So she put me, and I was about maybe 16 or something like that. And I was so afraid because I had stuff, I was seeing stuff when I was younger and all this.
Right.
But I kind of shut it down. I was like, no. And then that reading made me so afraid because I'm like, what if she says something bad or, and that reading, and I loved it afterwards. I was like, I want more. She was like so positive and saying things that actually happened. Like,
Yeah.
one of the things, I was living in Paris still, we're still in Paris. She said I was going to live here and, and I mean, a bunch of things that were far out of, like, not even mine yet,
Sure.
but it was all like so positive. But I was afraid, and I'm sure like there's people that are kind of afraid when the first time, even if you have like first timers that never had a reading, they're probably afraid of having like a bad, like
Oh
when
yeah,
a bad reading, not a bad reading, but something bad that comes through, or
totally.
you know, and I'm sure like every reader, you probably take on like probably say it in a positive way, the message, any message.
I try to like, you know, like even if it's a hard kind of message or something like that feels a little bit heavy, I try to be solution oriented, meaning like I don't just dump the information
More
and be like,
guidance.
bye. Yeah, I'm
There
like,
you go.
okay, good luck. I try to go, okay, like how do we handle or maneuver through this energy in the best way possible? You know, how do we, do you have to go through this, in order to learn what you need to learn? And I like to offer solutions or other ways of looking at it, so that it can be held in a different kind of context, because you can be there are readers out there. I've had readings that have been terrible, that I've received, and but I love getting readings, but sometimes, if that reader isn't fully trusting their own capabilities, or, or maybe they say they're operating from a fear, like some people just read your fear. I think that's true. Some people just read your fear, and it becomes self-fulfilling prophecy if you're just feeding on fear,
Sure.
So, mhm.
Or do you have because I've had that experience once with a reader that was basically reading my past. She didn't know me at all.
Yeah.
But she was like saying things from my past.
Yeah.
But meaning like she thought it was the future.
Oh
She
yeah.
was telling me like, oh, you're gonna move into this place, or you're gonna have kids, or you're gonna. But she was complete. Does it ever happen to you where somebody comes to you for reading and you're viewing a different timeline, or?
Oh yes, different timeline in the sense of, but the thing is you have to get comfortable with saying like, okay, like this isn't happening to you, now, but like, why is it showing up? There is like a hidden treasure in there somewhere. It might be they're reading your past, but they don't, I've had it happen where when I've received a reading, I had this happen a few times where I kept having readers like tell me I needed to get over something that was very traumatic, but like it never happened to me in this life, but I knew it happened to me in a past life. And it took me a minute to figure it out because it was so distressing. And but I've had it happen, like clients will come to me and it's just about like knowing to go deeper, be like, okay, I'm seeing this and this, and they're like, oh, that's already happened. Okay, well, what about that energy is happening in your life now, because it's connected. It's about putting the puzzle pieces together. And I think I think a lot of times that comes with just time and experience, like learning to recognize how to go deeper into the question,
There's one question that we always like to ask.
Sure.
What do you know and you want to transmit out in the universe?
Oh, for personal or collectively?
Well, I guess, for people that are looking this video and, they're on their mystical journeys too. And, something that that you're sure of, or, that you want to transmit, that you think people may have a better life if they have that knowledge, that piece of information.
I think that the thing that people should probably know the most is to really learn how to listen with their heart and not their head. And particularly when they're making decisions. I think one of the hardest things sometimes is making decisions that are for your best and highest when you are tuning in and tapping into all of the collective and personal energies of the people in your life and around you. Sometimes actually what I would say is learning how to make your choice out of love and not out of fear has been the biggest thing that's helped me. Like when I'm thinking about needing to do something in my life or making a choice, I have to really tune into am I doing this out of love or am I doing it out of fear? And that can be that those decisions can be the hardest, you know, especially because sometimes we think we're doing something out of love, but we're just like, we're actually doing it out of fear, whether we think we'll be rejected or that person won't be happy. And we think we're doing it out of love by sacrificing something, when really it would be in love for you to do the thing that your heart is saying that you should be doing. Because then you liberate other people to do the same.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, such a great message.
Thanks. I think it's the hardest things for us sometimes. There's a lot of conditioning to make yourself, and I see like a huge divide. You know, people will either do things solely for themselves, self-serving, or they will just sacrifice everything, you know, and be depleted. And I think there really has to be a balance created. And I do think that as like a species, and you know, I have more faith in humanity as a species to lean more into love than fear, even though it can be challenging, especially like after the kind of year that most of the world experienced, right? Like the whole world, which is not often that the whole world experiences the same, like learning opportunity, like through, you know, like just having to go through a global pandemic, you know. So I do have faith in that, even though it's been painful in some aspects, it is forcing us to move into the things that feel more in alignment with our truest calling.
Yeah. And it's still true. There's more and more research about, like even scientific research about being in the heart, like the brain, or the you know, not the brain here, but there's, you know, this conducts more than this. This is like it being in our heads. It's like
totally
being ruling the world lately. And then I think we're shifting slow. I mean, I hope we are. But once you're in your heart, then it's like, you know, it's completely a different story about like your experience and your decision making and everything.
Absolutely.
All right, I think we're about done. I want to if you can give us again details on how people can find you, see your work, keep updates with what you do, and you know,
absolutely. So I'm usually pretty active on my Instagram, which is at Marcella Kroll. If you go to marcellakroll.com, I have a mailing list there, and I try to go like once a month. I'll send out a newsletter with upcoming things, and I have a podcast called Saved by the Spell. So,
and then we'll write that down probably like in the comment section also of that video, so people can find it easily.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Thank you. It was great to connect again.
Yes, you too. All right.
Bye.